Phoenix will rise. Hey everyone, how's it? Kiyakahi Matsumoto here, back with another honest review, this time around of the movie Dark Phoenix. Now, before I get started on this, just as a bit of a disclaimer, I will use mild spoilers to help illustrate certain points, so if you don't want to get spoiled, I would turn this video off right now. Also, in case anyone is wondering how and why I give a movie the score that I give it, not to worry, I put a link in the description that will take you to a short video that gives an explanation as to my methods of doing so. So, to summarize, while the visuals were well done and the action sequences were decent, this second retelling of the Dark Phoenix storyline was plagued by several issues that culminated in a bit of a lackluster final installment of Fox's X-Men film franchise. James McAvoy reprises his role from the new X-Men trilogy as Professor Charles Xavier, a powerful telepathic mutant, also known as Professor X, and the founder of the all-mutant squadron known as the X-Men. He is also the founder and dean of the Xavier School for Gifted Youngsters, a boarding institution for mutant children that not only instructs them in academics, but also in controlling and honing their powers. Michael Fassbender also returns as Eric Lensher, a powerful metal and magnetism manipulator, Charles's former best friend and the on and off enemy of the X-Men, who goes by the moniker of Magneto. Eric feels that mutants are above humanity and should respond in turn with deadly force should their livelihood be threatened. Also reprising their roles from the new X-Men trilogy are Jennifer Lawrence as Raven Darkholme, a blue-skinned shapeshifter and Charles' sister figure, codenamed Mystique, Nicholas Hoult as Hank McCoy, Charles' close friend and associate who can transform on command into a blue-skinned and furred creature, with enhanced strength, speed, and agility, codenamed Beast, Sophie Turner as Jean Grey, a powerful telekinetic and telepath who becomes infused with the powerful Phoenix Force, Ty Sheridan as Scott Summers, a mutant who can fire red-hot concussive blasts from his eyes, codenamed Cyclops, Alexandra Shipp as Aurora Monroe, a weather manipulator, codenamed Storm, Cody Smith-McPhee as Kurt Wagner, a teleporter, codenamed Nightcrawler, Evan Peters as Peter Maximoff, a mutant with the ability to move at ridiculously high superhuman speed, codenamed Quicksilver, and finally, Jessica Chastain portrays Vuk, the leader of a shape-shifting alien race called the Debari who seek to manipulate the Phoenix Force for themselves. The film itself is set in 1992, where the X-Men are seen as heroes by the world following the aftermath of the Apocalypse incident 9 years prior. While the X-Men go into space to rescue stranded crew members aboard a damaged space shuttle, Jean bonds with a mysterious solar flare-like energy, which amplifies her powers greatly. At the same time, she begins to show signs of a split personality, and attacks humans and mutants alike when she loses control and her darker personality surfaces. The US military seeks to arrest Jean for the human casualties, Magneto and his allies seek to terminate her due to the threat she poses, and the Debari seek to manipulate the Phoenix Force for themselves, resulting in a fight between humans, mutants, and the Debari for the survival of their kind. Now, the things that this film did best were the action sequences and the special effects. Most of the cast's acting, for the most part, was praiseworthy. Fassbender and Turner's performances in particular were excellently done. Hans Zimmer's score also wasn't half bad either. Although, I am a bit confused as to why he scored this film, as he did say Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice would be the last superhero movie he scored. The stakes in the film also felt high and personal, as the X-Men are considered more of a family type when compared to the more professional Avengers, which was also a nice touch. I also liked how some of the Phoenix Force's lesser-known abilities, such as transmutation, were also showcased. Unfortunately, this is where things start to go south, so brace yourselves because this is a long list. Plus, again, I have to use mild spoilers to help illustrate certain points, so you've been warned. First and foremost is the continuity, or lack thereof. As I've said before, films in a shared universe and timeline need to pay special attention to continuity and detail, and this film is no exception. And spoiler alert, for those who have not seen the movies X-Men Days of Future Past, X-Men The Last Stand, or X-Men First Class, you might want to skip over this a little bit so you don't get spoiled. Anyway, the movie X-Men Days of Future Past sent Wolverine back in time to prevent an apocalyptic future, effectively erasing the events of X-Men The Last Stand. And, when Wolverine returned, everything seemed fine. Unfortunately, the end of Dark Phoenix didn't match that at all. Jean disappears into space, the school is renamed the Jean Grey School for Gifted Youngsters, Hank is the new dean, and Charles has retired and settled into Paris, France. Whereas in Days of Future Past, Jean is still around, Charles is still the dean of the school, and the school was never renamed, as far as we know. Another continuity error is the age of the characters, or at least their physical appearances anyway. Hank informed Raven in X-Men First Class that her shape-shifting slowed her aging down by quite a bit, and then Wolverine just doesn't age at all. But Charles, Eric, and Hank all look basically the same, considering that each of the new X-Men films are set loosely a decade after the previous installment. Starting with X-Men First Class, which itself was set in 1962, they should look quite a bit older by now. Even more so considering that the original X-Men trilogy was set in the early to mid-2000s, where these same characters were portrayed by much older actors. Another thing to point out is the extreme lack of character development by most of the main cast. Raven and Charles still argue about the safety and well-beings of the mutants, which they've been doing for the last 4 films. Eric still seeks to find peace only to be spurred back into action by some kind of tragedy, which also happened in X-Men Apocalypse. And most of the others were left on the back burner with very little focus or exploration into their characters whatsoever. And speaking of characters, the personality changes in certain individuals did not feel natural and felt either forced or out of character for them. Charles getting cocky and willingly putting his unit in constant danger in order to stroke his ego is one example, while Hank feeling vengeful, out for blood, and blaming Charles for the aftermath of them confronting Jean Grey is another such example. And speaking of Charles, I really did not care for the film portraying him as some kind of tertiary antagonist, and dividing the X-Men because of his decisions and increasing pride. He's supposed to be a voice of reason and a father figure for many, not someone who gets cocky and arrogant just because he's popular all of a sudden. And while we're on the subject of antagonists, there was no clear-cut villain, and the antagonist titles seemed to alternate between Jean Grey's dark side, Vuk, and Charles on occasion. The Debari also didn't have very much of an introduction/explanation, and left people wondering who they were and what they were really up to until the film's final act. Other minor things to nitpick at here were, there were certain moments in the movie that absolutely defied the laws of physics. I understand this is a fantasy film, but things need to be grounded in some sense of realism in order to keep things believable. In case you're wondering what I'm talking about, there's a scene in the movie where the X-Men are in space and they're trying to board a space shuttle, but they can't get in because the shuttle is spinning too fast. Now, Mystique orders Cyclops to blast the booster engine with his optic beams to slow the shuttle down. One problem: unless the beam is hitting the booster engine the opposite direction of the rotation, hitting that will not slow the shuttle down without an atmosphere. It's the first law of physics. A body in motion will stay in motion. Also, the plot wasn't very strong, and it didn't have much substance to it either. I mean, come on. If I can summarize the plot in 4 sentences, then yeah, it didn't have much to it. On top of that, the film keeps reusing the same tropes as the previous installments have done, which are going stale already. And finally, how specifically Magneto acquired the island of Genosha, aside from a verbal statement that him and his fellow mutants have legal rights to the land, was never fully addressed either. All in all, while director Simon Kinberg did his best to bring about a new generation of X-Men for the big screen while honoring the past films, his attempts to do so fell flat and honestly felt a bit anticlimactic. And that being said, why the bloody hell did Fox think it was a good idea to let him near the Dark Phoenix storyline again? I mean, he co-wrote The Last Stand, which was mediocre at best, and now here he is directing this film. Although I will say this in his defense, he did go on record and own up to the fact that he did not make a very decent film, which is commendable. I respect that. Not many people can do that nowadays. My only hope is that he learns from this mistake, and that either himself or Disney has the sense to keep him as far away from the X-Men franchise as possible once it gets integrated into the MCU. That said, based on quality, I give this film a 5 out of 10. Based on personal enjoyment, a 6 out of 10 at best. Good try, Kinberg, but please don't go for round 3 if they choose to do the Phoenix storyline again. Anyway, that wraps it up for my honest review of Dark Phoenix. I hope this answers any and all questions you may have, and if not, please feel free to shoot me a comment down below. And again, these are just my opinions. You don't have to agree with them. I'm just doing my best to let people know what I saw, and I'm just trying to be helpful. Anyway, thanks again for watching, and I hope to see you all in my next review, which features Spider-Man Far From Home. Anyway, have a great day or evening, depending on which part of the world you're in. Take care, stay safe, catch you later.